Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this plenary session on shifting tides, the impact of Trump's America on Asia and the Global South. My name is Charlie Campbell, and I'm senior correspondent for Time magazine. He's back. The American people have spoken, and Donald Trump returns as President of the United States from January with a pledge to shake up pretty much everything. Nobody can claim for certain what Trump 2.0 will mean for US foreign policy, but it's a safe bet that Asia will figure prominently. From negotiating the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, to starting a trade war with China, prevaricating over the status of Taiwan, and conducting protocol-shattering meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Asia was always a primary focus of Trump's first term, which is even more impressive when we consider that Trump spent less time overseas than any US president since Gerald Ford, I believe, and didn't visit the continent of Africa once. To unpack what Trump 2.0 might mean for the region and the Global South more broadly, I'm delighted to welcome a very distinguished panel. We have a lot to get through, so I'll get stuck in. Christine, perhaps I can start with you, if that's okay. Trump's first campaign in 2016 focused a lot on Asia, rebalancing alliances, resettling trade deficits with China. There was some of that this term in terms of 60% tariffs on China he was mooting, but it wasn't quite as focused. Do you feel that this time Asia is less of a focus of Trump's foreign policy, or are we in for a rough ride?
So I'm a South Asianist. I only study South Asia, so I can't really speak to China. What I see in this, what we've already seen of the Trump administration that's shaping up, is that he is authoritarian 101. He has identified a number of cabinet picks that are simply preposterous. They're absurd. We have a Fox News host that's being tapped to be the Secretary of Defense. And so these are more litmus tests of Republican loyalty. And I anticipate thoroughly that the Republicans in the Senate are not going to do due diligence, that they are going to be, they're going to follow their alliance with Trump, and they're going to confirm these preposterous appointments. And along with that is an evisceration of expertise. Trump has vowed that he's going to go through the civil service, and he is going to replace career bureaucrats with loyalists. So looking at the relationships that I follow, which is U.S. policy towards Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, I think even though, let's take, for example, the relationship with India, at first blush, there's a lot of commonalities between Trump and Modi. I'm sure Modi is absolutely thrilled that Trump has won the election. But when you look at what will happen, what's always maintained the U.S.-India relationship, despite big differences, so for example, India's support for Russia, has been this knowledgeable cadre in the State Department who keep this relationship going forward. So with the evisceration of knowledge and expertise, even a relationship that's kind of on autopilot can be imperiled pretty quickly. And if we look at the other countries of South Asia, the one thing Trump did do that I actually didn't find entirely objectionable was cut off aid to Pakistan, right, during the significant crisis with Afghanistan. But he didn't do so for reasoned decision making. He did it impulsively. So I think that we are in a very rough times with respect to U.S. policy towards South Asia. Sorry, I can't address the China questions. I'm not a China hand.
No, of course. Regarding the cutting off of aid to Pakistan, Aizaz, that $30 million which Trump cut off back in 2017 was obviously a massive statement towards his vision of the region, as was his negotiation, if that's the word to use, of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. What do you see as the potentials and the roadblocks for US-Pakistan relations going forward?
Thank you, Charlie. Since I take Ahmad and his team for putting up another fantastic edition of the Bay of Bengal conversation. And I think the title could not have been more appropriately worded, a fractured world. And that's where we are passing through. Now, Charlie, coming to your question about Donald Trump's tweet on the eve New Year Eve of 2018 that Pakistan had received US assistance to the tune of some figure, $33 billion he quoted, but did not receive anything substantial in return but deceit or something like that. I think that was essentially a frustration, an expression of frustration, because the United States was not getting its way in Afghanistan. And Donald Trump initially thought that he would conclude that military victory and come and retrieve the forces back to his country. But that didn't happen. So he was getting frustrated and expected Pakistan to actually take on the Taliban on the soil of Pakistan, whereas Pakistan felt that this would shift the war to Pakistan. So we wanted to help the US, but we thought that there was a political solution rather than a military one. And actually he moved towards that political solution. As you know, the negotiations started right after that with the Taliban, which concluded in February 2020, and thereafter the rest is history, as you know. Now coming to the future of Pakistan-US relations under Donald Trump, I believe it will be more of the same. After having left Afghanistan, I think the United States does not have much interest left in Afghanistan or even in Pakistan. I think their main concern at this time is competition with China, which you mentioned in your initial remarks. And for that, they believe that India in South Asia is their partner and not Pakistan. In fact, they think that Pakistan is China's close friend, and therefore, but that at the same time, I've also felt that the United States does not want to push Pakistan away completely to either Chinese fold or any other place, and therefore they want to stay engaged. But I'm not too optimistic that it will be a very close engagement. I think it will be more of the same. There will be some areas of cooperation. The United States is a large trading partner of Pakistan. United States is still a favorite destination of Pakistani students. Pakistani physicians end up in the US in large numbers. Pakistani IT experts are closely connected to the Silicon Valley. So on the whole, corporate America is still working with Pakistan. So my sense is that the relationship will not be warm, but it will not be cold either. I mean, it will be more of the same that we saw during the Biden years.
Okay, thank you. And Liping, when it comes to China, I remember when Trump first got in 2016, I was Beijing bureau chief at the time, and I was called to a very sort of bizarre meeting above a Starbucks in Wangfujin by a group of foreign service officials. It was myself and the bureau chief of the LA Times and the USA Today, and they were quizzing us on what Trump meant to do with China. There was that much anxiety. It seemed that China was reaching out to all aspects of the state to try and gain as much information as they could about what to expect. With Trump 2.0, I get the idea that China knows what's coming, that it is well prepared. But how do you think it is looking to mitigate some of the negative effects, especially his campaign pledge of 60% tariffs on Chinese imports?
Okay, thank you for a question. This time is my second time to participate in this conversation. I remember last year we sit behind a long table. I think it's more formal. And I prepared my speech. Yeah. Also to the question you just mentioned, the threat, Trump's threat of imposing tariffs as high as 60% on Chinese imports. I think that it represents a significant escalation from his previous term. According to analysis, these kind of tariffs could potentially slash China's economic growth by 2 percentage points. It's the figure from a bank's analysis. So this is not just a bilateral issue, I think. If Trump really do this, it's not a bilateral issue. That this could reverberate throughout the global supply chain. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ashok, India is widely seen as one of the beneficiaries of Trump's new term. Relations between Narendra Modi and Biden were frosty at times over human rights issues and other bugbears. And it seems that Modi and Trump have a rapport. Do you feel that India is in a good position to reap the benefits out of the next Trump term?
Thank you very much, Charlie, for that question. And since I take the floor for the first time, let me also add my words of appreciation to Dr. Zillur Rahman, to CGS for the excellent arrangements that have been made for this conversation, for this get-together. Now, as far as, your comment that relations between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Biden were frosty, I don't know whether I could subscribe to that. I don't think so, because if you look at the Biden era, relations between the two countries have really grown in a very significant way, meaning I could give you many examples in terms of the support that Mr. Biden gave to the presidency of India as far as the G20 is concerned, in terms of the launch of the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, in terms of the elevation of the Quad to the summit level, and over the last 3.5 years to have 6 summit meetings and innumerable meetings amongst the foreign ministers. So that doesn't really speak about any frostiness as far as relations between the two leaders are concerned. Let me put it this way. I think there is a strategic convergence as far as the two countries are concerned, which really brings them together, in the context of the fractured world that we are speaking about. There is a strategic convergence by which India and the United States, they work together. There is a good chemistry. There is a good rapport between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Trump that was visible, whether it is the holding of what was the Howdy Modi event in Houston, Texas in September 2019, where you had about 60,000 people attending, or you had the Namaste Trump event in Ahmedabad in India, where you had about 100,000 people who were participating. But let me put it this way, when Mr. Trump takes over on the 20th of January, he is going to be, let us say, the 4th term of a US president. And Prime Minister Modi has had excellent relations with President Obama. I could give many examples. He was invited to address the joint session of the US Congress in 2016. During Mr. Trump's time also, there have been a number of initiatives that have been taken, whether it was the launch of the Quad between the 4 countries, whether it is in terms of the institutionalization of the format of 2+2, that is the Indian defense and foreign ministers meeting their counterparts. It started in 2018 and it is continuing every year. In the area of defense, India being put in what is known as the strategic trade authorization first category, which is really a category similar to all NATO partners as far as the United States is concerned. So you don't have to go for any very lengthy procedures or approvals. So a number of initiatives taken during Mr. Trump's first tenure, and of course I mentioned a few initiatives taken during Mr. Biden's tenure. So his relations with all the past presidents have been very warm, have been very cordial at the personal level, but they have also translated into very significant advance in substantive terms also between the two countries. And I have no doubt that in Trump 2.0 also we are going to see very significant advancement. Our relations have been progressing, I'll put it, from over the last 24 years. When Mr. Clinton came to India in March of 2000, I think the trajectory has been upwards. It has been moving rapidly upwards, and I don't see any reason why it should be any different in Trump 2.0. The personal connect and the personal chemistry between the two leaders, of course, will give it that extra heft in taking the partnership forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ali Riaz, from Bangladesh's perspective, the Biden campaign was, so the Biden administration was quite critical of Sheikh Hasina's, the election which she stole, and her last sort of term especially. Well, Trump has actually been quite supportive of the Awami League, or certainly the Awami League seems to take his tweeting as such. Trump tweeted about barbaric violence and chaos in Bangladesh in the wake of Sheikh Hasina's ouster. Is Trump's return good news for the Awami League, or does it have an effect on the political transition currently taking place in Bangladesh?
Thank you, Chaudhry. Before we talk about the relationship between Bangladesh and US, I would preface it with two things. Number one is we have to accept that United States has entered into an era of autocratic rule. That needs to be made very clear. A very personalistic autocracy might be forthcoming in the United States. So understandably, with trifecta, especially with the Republican Party, what would be the foreign policy? Usually the autocrats have a very impulsive foreign policy. So I would not be surprised. Overarchingly, what we would see in the Asia Pacific and South Asia is somewhat transactional one, very uncertain and very unpredictable foreign policy going forward. I wouldn't be surprised. And now coming back to the question of Bangladesh, it would be largely determined. It's not about the political party, whether it's the Awami League or the current government or the opposition. In large measure, South Asia policy would be partly a continuation, but partly a greater emphasis on the relationship with India. And it is, on the one hand, the strategic partnership that we hear with respect to US-India relationship, but it is also a fascination for authoritarian rulers. I mean, Mr. Trump's fascination for Mr. Modi's style of governance is largely reflected in Mr. Trump's preference for the leadership like Putin or others. So I don't think that there would be a major shift in the sense that it would put pressure or it would be beneficial to a political party in Bangladesh. But what would happen is that the growing relationship with India and more warmer relationship with Mr. Modi, that could have some implications for Bangladesh going forward. But it would depend whether India sees it more as its neighborhood and it can come out, recalibrate its policy, that might help. But overarchingly, I don't see that it would be beneficial to Awami League or something as Mr. Trump enters into White House.
Okay, thank you. Aizaz, obviously in Pakistan, the nation's most popular Prime Minister, politician Imran Khan, lies in prison. I interviewed Imran before he came to power, and he was absolutely scathing about Donald Trump and his rhetoric about Islam and everything else. He was being compared to Donald Trump at the time, and he said, "Don't call me, Donald Trump. Call me Bernie Sanders." It was very clear about the distinction. But after they both got into power, they developed a rapport. And when I spoke to Imran later, he said, Donald Trump was always at the end of the phone when I wanted a call. We could always talk. And it seemed that the personality had overcome those political differences. Is that enough for Donald Trump to put pressure on the Pakistan government to release Imran Khan? Do you think there will be a play there?
Well, there is no doubt that former Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to United States and meeting with Donald Trump was very, very cordial in optics and also in substance. However, the former Prime Minister is facing some judicial processes within the country, and it is not easy for any outsider to interfere until or unless there is a quid pro quo, something that they would receive in return. I don't think there is much that Donald Trump as a person could receive by making an intervention in one of the countries. There are 193 countries that the United States has to deal with. So I don't think that that might happen. But we also hear that there is a popular opinion in the Pakistani American community that US administration should somehow intervene because they think that it is his incarceration is more political than legal. Nevertheless, I think at the end of the day, United States would probably not like to interfere in the internal affairs of Pakistan. That's my sense. Even if they make, they weigh in a little bit, at some appropriate level. But I don't think they will go to that extent that they must say that we are going to vote for one. They deal with, we have seen that time after year and decade after decade, United States has dealt with any government which is in power. That's what most countries do, and that's what I think United States too would do.
Okay. Christine, Trump will certainly want to separate himself from Biden's foreign policy and chart a new path. That's just the way he is. And it seems like it will be a transition from a values-based American engagement to one of sort of aligned interests. How damaging is that for US power projection in the region? And is there a danger that the US as a great power might decline in influence to just a garden variety power?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with the premise of the question. I think it's just too early to, I'm just looking at his cabinet selection. The only competent person so far that I've seen is Mike Waltz, who is his NSA.
Susie Wiles, maybe.
Right, what?
Susie Wiles, maybe.
I didn't hear.
Susie Wiles? Wiles.
Possibly. Mike Waltz is interesting to me because Mike Waltz is a serious person. Back when he worked for Cheney, I actually met with him frequently. Before he became a full-on Trumpanzee, he was a sensible professional. He has very strong opinions about Afghanistan. I mean, he was definitely a supporter of the forever war in Afghanistan. So I'm looking at it. If Waltz has more of a sway over Trump than some of these other yahoos that he's picked for his cabinets, for example, Mark Rubio as Secretary of State, I mean, who can take that seriously? There might actually be more policy continuity than not, right? Because if you actually look at Biden's policy, say, for example, on Afghanistan, he basically kept course with Trump's policy. And the India relationship has long been on autopilot, irrespective of whether there's been a Democrat or Republican. And the reason for that is whether you were Trump or Biden, although the degrees of concern might be different and the manifestations of those concerns might be different, everyone's concerned about China. So India can pretty much do whatever India wants, including being a petro launderer of Russian oil, which there's actually positive externalities of that, right? I'm not entirely saying it's a bad thing. But India has been able to, oppose US policy in a lot of significant ways, and it hasn't really borne a price for that. I don't actually think that Trump is going to do anything differently on Pakistan. Biden actually continued Trump's policy with respect to Pakistan. And I don't think Bangladesh or Sri Lanka is even going to merit a blip on the Trump radar. So with regards to the countries that I follow, the only relationship that really matters is the US-India relationship. And my only concern that might mess this up is the evisceration of expertise. But I think that Trump is even more hawkish on China than Biden is. So I would anticipate that the India relationship is going to be even more important than it was under Biden. So with regards to the countries that are in play in South Asia, provided that the professionals prevail and not the lunatics, I see more policy continuity than rupture.
Thank you. Li Peng, Christine alluded to some of the staffing issues within the new Trump administration. It seemed in the first Trump administration there was a lot of hawks, people like Peter Navarro, the author of Death by China, but also a few doves as well. Terry Bradshaw, the US ambassador to China, who I know quite well, was obviously had a personal rapport with Xi Jinping. These days, I don't really see the doves there. I don't see the good cop, bad cop. I just see the bad cops. I see people like Mark Rubio and others who are very, very tough on China. Are you worried about the personnel and whether there's going to be any conduits for constructive policy discussions?
Yeah, thank you for your question. As to the future Sino-US relations in the second Trump term, we think that there will be some struggles and competitions. Also, we have some compromises. For example, just you mentioned at the tariff rates, it is a great possibility that the trade tariff rates will be raised. And also, Trump will have other measures that were strengthening for example, it will also reshape the industry network, but there are still some issues that the two countries, China and United States, need to strengthen cooperation. For example, the climate change and also some other global issues, especially on the hot issues in the Middle East or in other places. I think the two countries need cooperation. As to the personal relationship between the two leaders, Trump and Xi Jinping, as in China's diplomacy recent years, we see the diplomacy at the summit level really played a greater role, than previous years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ashok, Trump is known for his transactional nature and approach to foreign relations, which can be a bit off-putting to some who are used to the value-based US policy of before. But there is some sense in transactional politics, and from India's point of view, it has a lot it can offer. Is there a scope for greater engagement through this sort of new paradigm of foreign relations? I'm just saying Trump is known for his transactional approach to foreign relations. I mean, does that open opportunities for India to engage more with the Trump administration? Because there are things which Trump wants, normally regarding trade, financial benefits, and if you give them to Trump, you can get away with a lot of other stuff which are concerns to previous administrations, like the Biden administration, but won't be held in high regard by Trump.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlie, for that question. I think the transactional element in Mr. Trump's policy, I think that has offers opportunities as well as challenges. We know that as far as the earlier dispensation, Trump 1.0 was concerned, there was a lot of focus on trade. There was a lot of focus on the very minimal trade surplus that India has with the United States. It's to the tune of about $20-odd billion, both in goods and services. And I think currently also India is about the 11th or 12th country in terms of the pecking order, in terms of the large trade surpluses that countries have with the United States. There are 11 countries above us. But that having been said, I think there are the terms that Mr. Trump has used, that India tends to abuse tariffs, etc. I think that will be a challenge. But today, India is a much bigger economy, if I could say that, as compared to what it was 8 years ago when Mr. Trump first came to power. Today, we are the 5th largest economy. We are the fastest growing major economy in the world, about 7% plus. So I think India's capacity to work with Mr. Trump has also increased. I think there are many other areas, Charlie, that I would like to suggest. Many of the initiatives that have been taken by Mr. Biden, as I mentioned about ISET, the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, in terms of manufacturing of semiconductors, in terms of transfer of technology in defense area. The defense cooperation between the two countries started really on a very serious note during Trump 1.0. I think it should proceed very well on during Trump 2.0. So I think there are many other areas in addition to trade in which both the countries can work together. Quad is another one of those, and I think as I mentioned, Mr. Biden has elevated it to the summit level, and I would imagine that Mr. Trump, would take it. I can understand that there is a propensity that we had seen in the first tenure of Mr. Trump that anything that was related to the previous administration, he would try to distance himself from that. But then the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, they are, so to say, his own babies. They are his own creations, at least the revitalization of the Quad. So I guess that is also going to go forward. We have seen that the ambit and the scope of the Quad has increased very significantly. As it has been mentioned, it is a force for global good in the Indo-Pacific. So I think there are many areas, in addition to the transactional elements that come into the trade basket, trade relations between the two countries, where India and the United States can work together to mutual benefit. When Prime Minister Modi sent out his message to President Trump congratulating him, after his conversation, he identified a number of areas like space, like defense, like semiconductors, so many. And I think those really provide good possibilities and good opportunities for expanding our bilateral cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Riaz, obviously Bangladesh, as we've discussed earlier in the inaugural session, is one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change, very low-lying. We saw the recent devastating floods. Trump in his first term withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords on his first day. He's vowed to do so again. How damaging is that from a Bangladeshi perspective and nations like Bangladesh, which are suffering the ill effects of the climate change, both in terms of the actual attempts to mitigate the effects and also in terms of having a forum to discuss and build common bonds and a rapport over such an existential issue?
This would have an enormous impact insofar as the climate change is concerned, because Bangladesh is at the forefront of the climate change and facing it devastatingly. So the global cooperation on climate change, as if it reduces, as it would happen with Mr. Trump withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, what we would see that less funds available, but most importantly, the lack of awareness and lack of effort from the Western countries. Already, as what we can say, the Western countries have not exactly lived up to their responsibilities insofar as the climate change is concerned. So for countries like Bangladesh, and it's not only Bangladesh, look at the Maldives, for example, what we would see that less global cooperation on addressing the adverse impacts of climate change, more difficult it becomes for the Bangladesh and others to face it. However, what is important here that what I would expect, despite the US withdrawal from this climate change agreement, Paris Treaty and others, if the European countries can step up, that would be a better option, and hopefully they will under the circumstances. But generally speaking, the absence of US leadership in climate change, as we can anticipate from Mr. Trump's previous administration, that this would continue, meaning that they would actually withdraw. But it's not only the climate change issue. If you look at the policies that we are anticipating, the protectionist policy, the isolationist policy, America First policy, and the transactional arguments of all these things, will have impact not only in the climate change but also in other contexts where global cooperation is needed. The thing, Charlie, if we go beyond the climate change for a moment, what I see over the last 4 years of Biden administration, there has been some restoration of some of these agreements and understanding, if not very much a multilateral arrangements have emerged in Asia and Pacific. With Mr. Trump in power, the challenge and the question for these countries in Asia Pacific would be whether they can sustain cooperation among themselves, even in the absence of the United States. Same goes with the climate change, same goes with some of the trade arrangements that we have seen during Biden administration. So as I mentioned previously, some of the things would be continuity of the policies, for example, China policy, maybe more hawkish than previously, but at the same time, some uncertainty and unpredictability would be essentially a hallmark of the coming 4 years of the Trump administration.
Thank you.
Can I add a comment?
Of course, please.
I think much is being made of the fact that President Donald Trump does not support the Accord on Climate Change, which has been negotiated in Paris in 2015 and later on by the COPs. My sense is that bulk of the work for climate change, mitigation, adaptation will be done nationally or regionally.
Yep.
And all this talk about loss and damage fund and related issues have so far not delivered much on ground. So it's not that Donald Trump will make a big dent on what has happened, because the action lies at the national level and the regional level. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Li Peng, obviously Trump's America First isolationism and its disparaging of international fora like the UN and withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accords presents an opportunity to China to help re-engage in these institutions and help and shape them more for Beijing's goals. Do you feel that the Trump 2.0 might be an opportunity for China to actually grow its global influence?
Okay, as to Trump's second term and with his American First policy, and somebody says that will create some vacuum, on international issues of international affairs, will leave China a bigger role to play. Yeah, I think, I'm a professor at the China Foreign Affairs University. I give classes to the diplomats from developing countries. And I remember in one class, a diplomat from Egypt asked me whether China can play a role to help Egypt solve the border dispute with its neighboring countries. Because she said that China played a role, bring the different parties of Pakistan together and bring Iran and Saudi Arabia together. So I think China is expected by some countries to play a big role. Yeah, if the Trump's American First continued, that maybe more possibilities, because China also under expectation. It has expectation from developing countries. Thank you.
All right, thank you. On which note, I think we'll open the panel to questions from the floor. If anyone would like to ask our panelists anything, if you could identify yourself and to whom you're addressing your question, that would be great. Thank you. This one there.
I am Sifat Iqbal. I have a question to the panel that what role could the Trump administration have played in the current Myanmar civil war crisis, where the junta regime fought against his own citizens who want the democracy? Thank you.
So who was that question addressed to?
Ali, would you like to answer that?
No, I can take it. I mean, with respect to the US policy, if you look at the Myanmar situation, despite the Burma Act and others, US policy has not been very clear and forthright on Myanmar issue. So I don't think that there will be a massive change under Trump 2.0 from the Biden administration. Rather, if there is any change, that would be basically disengagement, meaning the step back. Because at least for the Biden administration, human rights issue, democracy was at the forefront in some cases, if not all. For Mr. Trump, that's not an issue at all. So I don't think it is going to feature significantly in Trump administration foreign policy that Myanmar would come feature any more significantly than others, which is a very difficult thing. If I recall at the beginning, inaugural session, Mr. Tawhid Hussain was mentioning with respect to Rohingya crisis. That means the continuation of Rohingya crisis for Bangladesh. And I hope the US support for the Rohingya would continue because that has been a major source of support for Bangladesh to manage the Rohingya situation. But insofar as the Myanmar situation, I don't anticipate any major shift. If it is, that would be basically regression from insisting on democracy and human rights.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, hello, assalamu alaikum. My question is specifically for Mrs. Liping Shia. While the talk is about loss and damage fund in Paris Agreement Accord, or we have seen in previous COP conferences, my question is there any way we can make the countries liable for providing the funds to countries like Bangladesh or least developed or the countries that are being affected so much with the climate change? Is there any way we can make them liable to provide funds to these countries according to the loss and damage funds?
I don't know to whom that question is addressed, but may I also add a word or two to whoever would now would respond to that. You know, it has been my observation that developing countries and countries which have been hit hard by climate change have always been calling for compensations from the countries, from the industrialized countries, which were essentially responsible for all the changes that have happened in the climate. But I have also seen enormous reluctance on the part of those states to contribute much on that account. So I'm not very optimistic much will happen. Although the developing countries, the less industrialized countries will keep crying to and appealing for help and assistance, and the developed countries or the industrialized countries will not. This is a pessimistic view, but I feel that it is more realistic view. If anyone wants to add on to that, I most welcome.
Of course, please.
Yeah, the question that you asked is whether there can be some compulsion or some penalty or some, way that developed countries can be forced to provide assistance, financial assistance, technological assistance. Under international law, whether it is the Paris Accord 2015 or Copenhagen 2009, there is nothing really that international law can do to have, unless there are certain agreements like the WTO in which there is, if you do not meet your side of the deal, then you have to pay a penalty. But I think as far as the track record of the developed countries is concerned, it was decided that the developed countries are going to provide $100 billion of assistance to developing countries, and also technology for climate appropriate technology to developing countries at non-market price rates. But that has not happened. And after 2025, we were to look at some other ways of supporting the developing countries to put in these climate friendly technologies. And we have seen right now at COP29 in Baku, there are calls that $1 trillion per year would be required for assistance to developing countries. So I think the demands, the needs are increasing, but whatever is coming from the developed world, that is most inadequate and most insufficient. I think the only way is to continue to apply global international pressure on the developed countries, because this is an existential threat, not only for the developing world, but also for the developed world. So I think, and this is a transboundary issue. So I think all of the countries really have to work together.
Charlie, may I add to this?
Of course.
What exactly the developed countries have done in the last 10, 15 years, other than lip service? They haven't done anything. Yeah, they have done one thing, we can say, causing more damage to the environment, right? They've done it very well. Without what you are insisting on the punitive measures on the developed countries, who would actually come up with that? The international structure, the legal structure, however you put it, is unlikely to do it, because, if Maldives drown, what exactly is the problem with European countries? Does it matter to them? I know it sounds very, very pessimistic and very rude, and so on and so forth. So, nevertheless, that is what I am suggesting. As I mentioned initially in my remark, that the developed world has not lived up to its responsibilities under the circumstances. Now, situation might get worse under Trump administration if it withdraws, which is very likely. Then that's what the world looks like. And as we have heard, this is an existential crisis. I mean, as a matter of fact, increasingly the global climate change, those who live in the United States, even the climate change denier, cannot deny the fact that weather has changed. What is happening in Florida or what is happening in other parts of the United States is a grim reality which they continue to ignore, Mr. Trump included. So when things are happening at the doorstep and they can ignore it or completely deny it, be negligent. We can put pressure, we need to put pressure, and there should be pressure from the developing world, but likelihood of getting things out of developed world seems to be far-fetched.
Thank you. I think we have a question over there. If you could bring a microphone.
Should I ask the question?
Yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
I am Naushad Zamir. I'm a practitioner of the Supreme Court. My question probably be addressed to Professor Christian Fair, Ambassador Ashok. We recently actually experienced that Mr. Trump, while running his campaign before the election, made certain very disparaging comment about the minority being treated, how the minority is being treated in Bangladesh. That his comment was extremely not well informed at all. So do you think that he's going to be a little bit more well informed when he is when he is the president, when he is running his office as a president? And for Mr. Ashok, after the changes of the 5th of August in Bangladesh, we saw that the Indian media did not play a very friendly role in terms of the same issue, actually, in terms of how the minority is being treated in Bangladesh. That role needs some change. And then how do you think that Bangladesh should approach that issue? How do we communicate more with the Indian media in terms of those comments?
So I'm not really sure what to tell you. Trump is an unreconstructed racist. So get in line. He insulted a lot of other people. If you followed what he said about Puerto Ricans, and Puerto Ricans are actually American citizens. Trump ran his campaign on white male supremacy, right? That was his central messaging. And what I found, for me, I'm from a rural area in the United States, so I was not someone that thought he was not going to win. In fact, I knew he was going to win. What you have to understand about the United States is that we are a very racist country, but we are a much more misogynist country. If you actually looked at the people of color, specifically the men of color who voted for Trump, they voted for him because of their misogyny, and they wanted access to male supremacy. If you look at the white women who voted for Trump, they wanted access to white supremacy, right? So the fact that he said disparaging things about Bangladesh should not be surprising to you, because he said disparaging things about American people of color. So I don't know what the question is there. He's an unreconstructed racist, and don't expect anything different from him.
Thank you very much for the question. There was a part of the question addressed to me, so let me try and respond to that. Thank you for that question. You know, the first thing that I would like to say is that India has a free media, a fearless media, and they will write whatever, you know, when they, the manner in which they perceive a particular situation. And, you know, we have many representatives of the media participating in this conversation. I think the way out of it is, meaning if you want this to be, if you think it was not properly reflected, but I think there was a huge cross-section across which were giving different aspects, which were giving different perspectives on the issues, on what was happening here. And some of them you might think that they were not appropriate, some others might be more, you know, to your own way of thinking. But I think the best way to go forward in this is to have conversations, to communicate. And I think, as I mentioned, that there are a large number of our media personnel here who are very articulate, who are very effective, who are read and listened to with very great interest. So I would recommend and I would encourage you that you get in touch with them. And I think the counterparts from here, whether it is from the political circles or from the media fraternity, to get in touch with them and to have conversations. And I guess have conversations also with the policy people, because, you know, the media is reporting something, but also there are analysts, commentators, you know, from think tanks. They are also commenting on this, and their views would also be important. So greater communication, greater interactions. That is the way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question there, please. Or maybe the lady at the back first, is that?
I was waiting for my turn. Guest. My question is much more directed towards Professor Shia or Christine. Any one of them can answer. It's much more related to the Taiwan issue, as we can see that Trump has been re-elected as the President of the United States once again. I mean, is there a possibility that we can see the similar situation like the Russia annexation of Ukraine, like China going to annex Taiwan, and how can Trump actually respond? I mean, how much the relationship will further strain over the growing tensions in the Taiwan Strait? Thank you.
Diping, do you want to take that one?
As to the Taiwan question, I think it's the most important one inside the U.S. relations. As you know, China, the one China principle. Every country established diplomatic relations with China, adhere to this principle. And Trump, you know, during his camp for the presidency, he said he questioned the value of defending Taiwan, and he said he would, if China do something toward Taiwan, and he would increase the tariffs, to China's export to the United States. He would use economic measures rather than the military ones. As you know, there is a Taiwan Relations Act in the United States, which was passed in April 1979, and that is a domestic, American domestic law. So as to Americans' policy, whether they have changed, whether there will be change in U.S. policy toward Taiwan, I think Chinese also a wait and see. So I think it's a most complex issue and the most sensitive issue in bilateral relations, and also concerns with the stability in the not only in Asia, but also, I think, around the world. Yeah.
Thank you.
It needs to be taken care by both parties very, very carefully.
Thank you. And one more there. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just thank you, sir, Charlie. My question is to Christian. I know, refugee and migration issues is one of the important issues. Like Trump was the one who wanted to securitize the migration in his different speeches. And there is a hope that US administration earlier said that they cannot take some Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh earlier. But do you think due to Trump came in power, would there be any changes in terms of refugee flows? And also, would he go for, again, his madness of creating a wall in the Mexico border, and any implication for the Bangladeshi students who are going USA for higher studies? Do you think any implication on that due to power? Thank you.
I think that's for you, Christine.
So Trump has been, again, part of his white male supremacist agenda has been anti-immigration. He's talking about rounding up and deporting millions of immigrants in the United States. So if you think that he is going to take Rohingya refugees, you are out of your mind. It's beyond a question. So with regard to Bangladeshi students in the United States, essentially foreign students are the mainstay of higher education in the United States. Essentially, they are a revenue stream, right? So most of the foreign students, they pay full, I'm a university professor, so I see this in action, right? So foreign students tend to pay full freight, and that allows the universities to create scholarship opportunities for American students. So I don't see any reason why there would be any issue with student visas. Now, there's a larger issue here. The Trump administration is very hostile to higher education in general. So I anticipate that there's going to be a war on higher education. So foreign students that are applying to American universities, they're going to be a lower level concern with regard to the larger battle that the Trump administration is waging against higher education.
Correct me if I'm not correct. What I have heard is that mostly Donald Trump is talking about illegal immigrants and not those who are already legally inside.
That is a big no, right? Because the so-called anchor babies, I don't know if you guys know what this disparaging term is. Illegal Americans come to the United States, they give birth to children who are, by US law, American citizens. So these so-called anchor babies who are legitimate American citizens are also going to be deported along with their undocumented parents. So for those Trump supporters that thought that Trump was going to be good for the economy, you vote for the party of a face-eating cheetah thinking it's not going to eat your face. Well, I'm looking forward to their face being eaten. Because as soon as he deports these undocumented workers and their legal American citizen families, do you know what's going to happen to the price of food in the United States? Who does all the food production in the United States? The price of meat. Who works in the slaughterhouses? Right? So what we're actually going to see if Trump effectuates this policy, and it's not just illegals, it's also the so-called anchor babies. We are going to see, if they think the price of eggs is expensive now, right? Wait till they see what happens after Trump effectuates this anti-immigrant policy. What is motivating this is that there is a lot of anxiety among the white Christian nationalists in the United States that the fabric of the United States is changing, right? That white people are going to become a demographic minority. And that's what's generating this anti-immigrant antipathy, is this desire to retain whiteness and white supremacy in the United States. And the people that voted for Trump, in large measure, voted for that.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
This is Imtiaz from Pakistan. If I were to extrapolate this entire panel's conversation accept Ambassador Ashok's position on Trump and what he expects from him. It comes out as if Donald Trump were a fixed box, pre-programmed robot, as if he would take all the decisions by himself and not by people like Elon Musk, who had been at the back of his entire digital campaign, who drives ideas, who is driving technology. And most of the references you have all made, most of you, is to Trump 1. So why would you assume that Trump 2 would be rooted in Trump 1 and not in Trump 2 in future technologies and ideologies? Thank you.
Charlie, can I respond to that?
Yeah, please do. But I think Christine wanted to talk first.
Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah,
then
I'll just be very
jump
brief.
in.
I really appreciate that question for Imtiaz's goal because I think you're spot on, right? I mean, if you look at the cabinet positions of Trump 1.0, whether or not you like their politics, they were serious professionals. They may have been hawkish, but they knew what they were doing. What we're also witnessing is just unprecedented corruption, right? So Elon Musk basically bought his way into this Trump position. We are entering an era of corruption in American politics that we've never experienced before. And I think that what's going to happen for the next 4 years is going to be generationally changing. So I really appreciate that question. You'll notice that in my remarks about Trump, I don't believe he's going to be fixed. I think this is about autocracy. He is going to be putting forward absurd policies, not because he believes in those absurd policies or that he has an ideological conviction to them, but it's about generating and proving support amongst his loyalists. And I think this way of making policy is going to have necrotic effects that are going to long perdure, long after Trump is out of office, when he's out of office, if he's out of office.
So do you believe they're oblivious to the possible consequences of such policies?
Sorry, have you anything to add, Ali?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. The argument that we should not be looking at Trump 2.0 as if it is a repeat of Trump 1.0. I said, in a sense, you are right. It would be worse. So it would not be 1.0. The reason that I suggest, one is if you look at the administration, the emerging administration, vis-a-vis Trump 1.0, it would be more politically, ideologically driven than professionals. And the second thing is, and now I'm going to make a very bold claim. Autocrats' second term is lethal. Let me repeat it. Autocrats' second term is lethal. And that is what is going to happen with Mr. Trump. There will be long-lasting impact on the society. Elon Musk and others, if we are expecting that those who have bought into their position in Trump administration, Musk is one of them, basically money, what drove him to this position. But the most important thing is that at the end of the day, Mr. Trump will drive the policy. That is what Mr. Trump is. And it would be worse in the sense compared to his first term, because previously he have, if not listened to, at least perhaps tried to listen to it. But next term, I don't think he would even listen to anybody. He would do what he wants to do. And that's the very typical hallmark of the autocratic regimes.
Okay, we're out of time. So I know you've been waiting a long time. So if you could keep it very, very succinct, and we'll have to close. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar. Sir, as a student from Bangladesh, I wanted to ask you that before discussing about Trump policies in Asia, in Bangladesh, or in China, shouldn't we discuss about India or Modi's politics or Modi's vision for his neighbors? As our murderer, our genocidal former Prime Minister is hiding in your country, India. And
not directly related to Trump in Asia, but
and the government of India is giving shelter to her. So I wanted to ask that shouldn't we discuss about Modi's India first, then discuss about Trump's policies or Trump's things? And my second part question is to Ali Riaz sir. Sir, don't you think it is disappointing that there is no discussion on after 5th August Bangladesh and India relationship? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that question, and I think the India-Bangladesh relations are very important for Bangladesh. India-Bangladesh relations are very important for India. And I would like to bring to your attention of the whole audience that India looks at Bangladesh through the lens of its neighborhood first policy. And that was the policy that was initiated right in the first year that Prime Minister Modi came to power in 2014. And I would submit for your consideration that that policy, and along with the Act East policy, because Bangladesh is the first country that was also initiated in 2014, that policy by Prime Minister Modi, and Bangladesh is the pivot for both of these policies. Now, as far as India's relations and what we have done, and I would say that it has been a very strong sense of partnership between India and Bangladesh. I think everyone here must realize, and you know, you, madam, are a student, you said, of politics, international relations, that India works with the government that is in position at that time. So during this period, whatever period, whichever government was in position in Bangladesh, we worked with that, and today we are working with the dispensation that is currently in position, in place here. So I would submit to you that as far as India's policies are concerned, they are designed to encourage and to work towards security, stability, peace and prosperity of Bangladesh and the Bangladeshi people. And that policy is going to continue irrespective of whoever is in position of power and authority in Bangladesh. Charlie, if you permit, I would like to sort of, just, the earlier question that we were discussing, just one comment on that. Okay. As far as India is concerned, the way we would look at it is Trump 1.0, of course. By that you come to know what his thinking is. His pronouncements that have been made over the last several months that has come, as far as what are some of the appointments that he has announced. For instance, we spoke a little bit about Mike Waltz, and he was the co-chair of the India caucus. So we would imagine that people like him and some of the others who have a better understanding and a better appreciation of India and the potential of India-US partnership, they will guide this forward. And the final point, that the elevated level of India-US relations that had come during Mr. Biden's tenure, Mr. Trump will take that forward. So I think we are looking at India-US relations in Trump 2.0 with both cautious optimism and anticipation as to what it holds for us. Thank you very much.
Well, on that note of cautious optimism, I think we should close. Thank you all for your questions, and please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists for a fascinating discussion.